All right, well, we'll go ahead and start. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock.
Oh, thank you. So much pressure.
You know, really.
Recording in progress.
Okay, can I get someone to make a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
And a second? All right, so Kevin and Fernanda, thank you. All those in favor of the agenda signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, thank you. We have an agenda. Communications with parents, citizens, and staff. We are going to have a presentation by the Valley Community Center, but before we do that, is there anyone else here who wants to speak to the board? No? Okay. Just checking because wasn't sure. All right. So, then without further ado, the Valley Community Center, you're up. You're up. Sure.
My name's Tanner Romano.
Aaliyah.
DJ Keith. Mike Howe. Travis Romano. Brothers. Don't vote against me. We're a small group. We formed to try to bring a concept to life, or at least give it some substance, some foundation to present to you guys in the community by way of a community center. So tonight we're asking for you to review where we're at. We put a package together, and we're looking at this stage for your general support. Hopefully we'll have it. And beyond that, a consideration to pledge a plot of land on the south end of the property.
Okay.
So the presentation will go through a lot of that. I know we only have 15 minutes, so I try to keep that short and sweet, but then we can dive into questions and anything you guys have.
Sure. Go ahead.
Kind of broken up there. So. Just stand up so I can see everything too. What's that?
Just tell me when to move it forward.
Oh, okay. So my name is Travis Romano, and I'm obviously on the board here with everybody. That we partnered with Otter Valley Activities Association as our nonprofit, and began to do some research and develop into the feasibility of, is this something that was needed, and if so, what does that look like? So our focus has been on the need for a community center. The response was absolutely clear. We met with area facilities, Rutland to Middlebury, and surrounding communities who have recreational facilities, and we're overwhelmed by the response, not only welcoming an additional facility to complement theirs, but also the overflow that they currently have. So we can move right along. If anybody has questions, please stop me. We'll try to make it quick because this is a fairly lengthy slide. I think we want to get to the meat and potatoes of it at the end. So essentially, we started looking at the community as a whole, essentially 7 communities that funnel into Otter Valley, and Otter Valley being the nucleus of where all of our communities and kids go eventually for high school. So we established that Otter Valley made the most sense as the location, and we started looking at what that might look like. We can go ahead and move ahead. These are some slides of the current Otter Valley facilities, and
This one's blow through. The
next room we have
should be.
blow through.
Just trying to show the need. You can see how they're literally overflowing.
So early in 2023, we applied for some funds so that we would have some capital to be able to do some of these projects and research. Trust Public Funds in Brandon awarded us some money, so we were able to get McLeod Architects on board and give us some conceptual drawings and renderings, and we met with all of our committee members, put together a pro forma and a budget, and looked at what communities we would serve and how that might look. If we move ahead to the next slide, you can see these are the communities. It's kind of hard to read on the side, but those are the demographics, show population. So which communities we would look to serve with a center like this, and obviously these are mostly communities that students end up here at Otter Valley eventually.
Trying to build up to the reason why we picked Otter Valley.
We visited the centers, as you can see here, Middlebury, Rutland, Bristol, Virgins, and Shelburne. Specifically, I know myself, I went to the Rutland Rec Center and met with Tyler, who's a facilities manager there, who actually is an Otter Valley graduate. We learned an awful lot about these facilities and how they operate and what their needs are, their programming, and so forth. And again, just telling us that we have a great need in our community for something like this, and continue to work with those folks to kind of outline what the most important needs are as far as the facility itself. As you can see, gym, pickleball court, weight room, cardio room, perimeter walking track, kind of the most important areas of a facility like this, and what associated supporting spaces, that would essentially need. So, flexible space is a huge area where, whether it be after school students needing a place to go in between sports and what have you, we wanted to make this as usable as we possibly could. And we get to the next part is where do we put it? As I mentioned before, Otter Valley is a really good, it lends a very good area for us to live. And Tanner, maybe you want to add a little bit onto this because you dug into this portion.
Yeah, admittedly, born and raised in this area, graduated from Otter Valley, did not know there's 150 acres that go with Otter Valley. Like, I don't even know how many miles it is. Somebody does hear of trails and biking paths and so forth. So between the fact that the kids are all here, most of the kids, a lot of the sports programs are here, it really lends itself really well to this location. We looked at water and sewer capacity, electrical capacity, and we really think it would create a hub for the campus as a whole, because a lot of the programs that happen outside of the school itself just happen kind of in a haphazard way a little bit. When you come to an event here, you're not really sure where to go or how to exit. It could give kind of a nucleus to that, so to speak. So the location that we kind of zeroed in on, if you keep scrolling down there, there's the school, and where the big red arrow is, that's right on Route 7, just south of the exit out of the parking lot. There's a little sliver of land there. The gray or the tan and the green shadowing is showing wetlands and wetland buffers. So what's there is a pretty small slice of real estate in terms of what you could actually build on to fall outside of those areas. And coincidentally, a community center fits in there really, really well.
A rough estimation, 20 acres, we around there.
10 acres.
10
so
acres. Somebody asked the question,
this
so
is-
I figured I'd bring it up.
I want to interrupt. I'm not sure what you're talking about on the map.
Where the arrow is.
See where the red arrow is on the...
Is that the school?
No,
School's up.
school's up above
School, parking lot.
Maybe someone could go up
Oh,
and
okay,
close
all
it.
right, I got it.
There's the school, there's the end of the parking lot.
And then there's the parking lot.
The softball field,
Okay, thank you.
parking lot, when you exit the parking lot, this is the facility, the footprint of the facility overlaid on that map.
Okay, thanks.
So you can just kind of see how not much else can fit in there. For discussions in the community about possibly a middle school or something like that fitting there, it would have to be a very small building to fit on that piece of real estate based on our research. So we think it's a good location.
It's a single-story building, right?
Yes.
Correct, single story building, yep. So, keep going, Charlie.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can see these are just some of the reasons and community impact. Obviously we did a lot of research and a lot of development into this to figure out, how this might impact negatively and positively into each one of the communities that we would hopefully be sitting in front of select boards and talking about this in the future. Step one for us is to sit in front of you tonight and hopefully get a piece of land where this could live and establish where a center like this could live if it were to come to fruition. So these are some of the reasons and impacts that we found.
Any questions on all that before we go into like what this thing could look like? You must be doing a really good job explaining.
So you said there's 10 acres there? How much of that are you actually?
There's more than 10 acres there. We're just saying that, correct, the facility like this with stormwater management, parking lots, the building itself would need around 10 acres
Oh.
pledged, correct? Yep. If you were to consider it.
So we would we have to have someone come in and do, we would essentially give this to you and you would own it or the town would own it, or are we still gonna own the property?
Totally up for discussion. We've kind of debated that back and
Okay.
forth, what's the best way, and I think it needs to be a conversation with the school. Because in our opinion, it should be an extension of the school. It should be a very open, collaborative facility, similar to, I know a lot of people here probably been to the one in Middlebury. It works in concert with the school program pretty immensely.
Tanner, I have a couple of questions. What's the gradation on Route 7 to that location? Does it drop down? Is it level?
It is not level.
I didn't think so. It's quite a drop, right?
Yeah, it drops down, and then you can see the two yellow lines with the contour lines. There's probably a 20-foot grade change across the lot, something like that.
So you would build that up?
Yeah,
Or
there'd be
you
a
would
cut and
drop it
fill
down
to,
and share our driveway?
there'd be a
because
cut and
it's-
fill to create a level lot there. Yep.
Probably be unlikely to let us have another cut on Route 7.
Correct. That's why we connected to the extension in this conceptual plan.
Okay.
And you probably wouldn't want another entrance on Route 7. You, I
Right.
would think, would want to funnel them together.
Especially
but,
right there.
yeah.
And then the other one is, I don't know if you've seen it, and it's hard for me to tell from here, but some of the preliminary middle school designs had a secondary building down that way. Do you know where that was?
It was down on the football
It
field.
was on the football field, which was on the
Yeah,
other
it must-
side.
It's got to be on the other side of the property, I would think, because there's not a lot to the south of that. There's, I think Gagne's owns the property just to the south of you guys.
So it was across from where that building is, but then further down is the football field, and that was where the middle school was potentially.
Okay, thank you.
And the plan is to use the school parking lot for parking?
No, this has parking shown in it. So just for frame of reference, that footprint is very similar to this. It's a slightly larger than the Middlebury Community Center. If you guys, if anybody's been there,
But you still have to drive through our parking lot to get to it, I believe, right?
you would,
Yes.
correct.
So would we want to think about changing how that's access? I mean, we all know what that exit looks like right now, and
Horrible.
so
I love all these questions, but
you have
we
to
got to
run.
walk before we can run. This is really at the conceptual stage and really
Okay.
just trying to establish a potential location where this facility could live.
Okay.
Because that's really the next step in the process for us to finish the business plan, to finish the estimating process, so we can actually present it to select boards and get community buy-in, and hopefully they would agree to put it out for bond vote.
I mean, essentially, we would imagine there'd be a traffic study, there would be all kinds of things that happen once it gets to that point, but
I'm just
Absolutely.
thinking there definitely have to be a change to traffic flow, because I can't imagine just saying, sure, zip down through the parking lot and then zip into the,
exactly.
Okay.
It'll be those questions, wastewater, stormwater, electrical,
Okay.
like on and on and on, but you can see how all those questions would change and answers would change if that lot became, say, up in the industrial park in Brandon, which is another one that became somewhat of an option. We don't think it's as good as here, but that's why this is kind of the next step.
Now, do we know so we don't know if the sewer plant could support it or not? Because, I mean, that would be on our end after as facilities, if it was above capacity.
So I'm going to answer that, but just go a couple more slides. It might help illustrate where we're at in the process. And this, Brenda, might dovetail into your conversation later on this evening, too, in terms of how you go from point A to point B. We're at the conceptual stage. This is pretty high level. You would have to hire engineers, hire architects to fully design all this and engineer it all out before we could answer those questions, which we obviously don't have the funds to do right now. We got a very small amount of seed money to put this package together. But there's really no sense in us going much further if the school board says, pardon my French, oh hell no, this isn't living on our property. That's really what we're tasked with tonight.
Sure.
If you say yes, then that sets up the domino effect of other questions and answers that we have to go through and design work we have to do. So this is a perspective drawing just showing what the facility could look like from the exterior. When I first saw that, I'm like, really? But it's kind of grown on me. Well, our architect that we hired, he's admittedly a very modern architect, but he's like, do you want just the plain Jane box that everybody has, or do you guys want to have something special that's sets you apart? So it's a pre-engineered structure, which is a pretty inexpensive structure to build, but it's got a little flair to it. This is the floor plan, just showing the different programming spaces that were outlined earlier on in the slide. So the gym, a walking track, weight room, bathrooms, pickleball. Yeah, pickleball was like probably everybody we talked to. It was.
We almost lost a gym due to pickleball.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, as we've mentioned, this is conceptual because we've talked about moving the flexible space over closer to the gym, so I have room for chairs and mats and things that make perfect sense. You know, this will obviously change and develop over time.
This was giving us enough of a starting point so we could assess the land needs, we could do an estimate on it, we could try to put a value on it, put a business plan together to see if this whole model would prove out. Here's some images, some different concepts that we've looked at that could fit in the facility.
I love the OV blue. Good idea,
Good idea.
Tana.
That's all DJ.
We got an image guy.
We're very diverse
So you
group
might
here.
have it there.
Design is not my forte. So we corralled a local contractor to do a detailed estimate for us to put a price tag on what the facility could cost.
I like where the black box ended up.
What is the black box?
The suspense is killing us.
Yeah.
Survey says.
It's a $12 million facility. Keep going.
You don't understand that.
To me, that doesn't matter, right? To me, what's impactful is the price to the taxpayer based on what their property values are. That's the punchline, I think, in my opinion. So that's what we're trying to drive this to. Because obviously, looking at $12 million is a big.
Can you go back up? Membership revenue. So you expect everyone to have a membership to this? Is that how they do it in other places?
That's how they do it in Rutland
Yes. Yep.
and most other places. I think almost exclusively.
But doesn't have to, and again, this is a pro forma, so this is like a really conservative, when we looked at, you know, the financials from the surrounding rec centers that we visited, this is a really conservative, you know, estimate of what revenues could look like and where it might come from. I'm not sure what that was. Something beyond-
No, that was the soccer game under the lights, which we thank you guys for helping us raise this. Raise those.
So again, just for illustration purposes, to kind of give us an idea of what an annual operating budget looks like, what annual revenues could look like, you know, as we start tweaking these numbers and starting to put together a business plan, all information that we would need to start moving forward.
How does Middlebury do theirs? They don't do a membership.
But they don't have like a weight room, they don't have that
Okay.
kind of stuff in there. It's-
Right, and what we found is there's a lot of categories, so like there was some centers that had like a senior rate, local seniors, they had a resident rate, they had an
Okay.
out of state, I mean,
Yeah.
we found like Rutland, for example, have people that come from as far away as Middlebury down to Manchester that are members there and go there regularly. So, you know, there's a whole host of ways that this could be structured.
They have a
The
coffee.
membership's also gonna keep ownership for the people to keep better care of it and
Yeah.
also help keep the equipment up to date.
And as you can see, it's
And
minimal.
You've gotta have some kind of,
Yeah.
something to make them wanna own it when they're in there so they don't abuse the equipment. And
I don't remember Tyler's exact quote, but when they did their pro forma, Tyler from the Rutland
It's kind of
facility,
on, yeah.
he said they projected, I forget the number, 200 membership, 200 members, and I think they're at what?
They're at over 1,500.
Yeah, he said it was just astronomical, the outpouring of.
We were honestly nervous going to other rec departments saying, we're gonna compete with you, you know? And they were welcoming, they were,
Good.
you know, more than welcoming.
Keep rolling.
Yeah.
So this is an estimated cost to taxpayers based on the grand list totals from a mix of last year and this year. Some of that data is still fluid. But it's just trying to paint at least a broad brush stroke as to what this would look like. If you keep going down,
This is April 1st, 2024 values.
it's a mix. Some towns have been updated and what they provide is like
Because
Brandon and
they've
Pittsburgh, but others haven't. So
So,
like, please do not take this to the bank, but this is just showing order of magnitude, what it translates to for property taxes for folks. And that's where we feel like, okay, this seems reasonable. Like, we haven't come forward with something that's gold plated that we're asking folks to double their taxes. And maybe this wouldn't be received well on voting day, but we think it's worth trying. So if you scroll that down just a little bit more, for the average $300,000 Appraised property value works out to $7.87 a month if the 7 towns all participated, based on grant list values.
And so in working with bond council, we've established that, best case scenario, those 7 towns enter an interlocal agreement, and those are
You keep rolling down.
essentially, that's all verbiage that we present to select boards. But if, say, 5 towns elected and 2 didn't, then those numbers would change.
This is the process that the bond council has walked us through in terms of next steps. Should we secure a piece of property to go to the different select boards at each town to present to them and get their buy-in, and if so, the exact steps that they would have to take to be able to put it on the ballot to the voters, put it out for bond vote.
Susan has a question online.
It's not really a question. Can I just point out the fact that our schools are in desperate need of renovations or rebuilds? So while I can totally understand why a rec center is really important for communities, if we're going to be raising money or raising taxes, we are in desperate need of our schools with an update. So that's just my 2 cents. I don't know if that's just my 2 cents. I needed to say it. That's it.
Thanks, Susan.
We wholeheartedly agree. That's why we believe this needs to be in concert with the schools. If you look at some of the pictures we showed in the slide earlier, the schools are overwhelmed. Like, it's almost embarrassing when we hold events at some of the gyms for a basketball game, for example, and an elderly woman can't get her walker through the door, or there's just it's not right, So that we totally agree, and we think that this could help relieve some of that burden.
Wait, but how? How could it relieve some of the burden if we need the money for the buildings?
There's money that's needed on all fronts. The facilities is certainly one of them.
All right, I'm gonna mute now.
So we just went through this select board process for each town. If they agreed to go forward, how we would put it through the bond vote, how it would go to the voters, and ultimately the voters are the ones that would decide whether or not this moves forward. But in order for us to get to that point, again, tonight we're here looking to see if you would agree to pledge the land conceptually, should it come to that.
I just think you gotta market it definitely as a community center and not part of the school. Because if you put that up at the same time as our school budget on a bond, the confusion of the community is definitely gonna be there. So we'd have to have you guys full force market it as your it's located here, but it's not part of the school. You understand?
I think that's something important to mention also to response online there is that, this would be a completely separate entity, a completely separate budget, completely separate, facility and structure, and it would have its own, built into those pro formas as its own employee, somebody to administer it and so forth, so.
Well, it actually makes revenue, where the school doesn't really make revenue.
Right.
So it's somewhat self-sustaining, to a
Somewhat.
point.
I mean, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I have a couple of different. Did you have something else? Okay. So a couple of questions. Number one, as you know, and as Greg kind of alluded to, I think, our budget went down 3 times last year. And we are also, or we have been in at least the last couple of meetings talking about a middle school model here at school and possibly adding on to Otter Valley. But we're also very mindful of the fact that people are still reeling from the fact that everything and anything, right, lately, prices have gone up. And so I think as a board, we're leery of a bond. We're leery of doing anything from our standpoint. And I'm worried that, I worry that that piece of property, even though we don't use it and we give it to you, if that was the will of the board, I think people would still think it belonged to Otter Valley. Do you know what I mean? That it's still a part of the school.
Like I said, I would hope that it is in concert with the school.
Well,
personally.
right, but that, like you said, it'd have to be marketed really hard to say that it's not. Because if you're gonna have basketball stuff there, you know, kids are gonna be there, and our kids are gonna be there all the time, more than likely.
I mean, when you say marketing hard, you want to make sure that you're not giving the illusion that the school is asking for the money to build.
Yes, we
Yeah.
don't want the community
We're not,
thinking we're just
we're not
building
trying to
another
make
gym,
that disillusion at
just
all.
under a different name.
Okay.
No.
Um,
We just recognize that the school can't facilitate the need, especially when it comes to the activity programs, in our opinion, based on our research. And a lot of us are coaches, a lot of us have kids that go here.
sure.
I mean, there is no facility in our area. I mean, you either have to go to Middlebury or Rutland. So, I mean, there is definitely a need.
So I-
My concern is just, we have a budget we have to pass too.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And it's going to be drawing that fine line to let the community know this is our stuff, this is not our stuff. And, you know, I mean, yeah, it's nice to see the royal blue of Otter Valley colors in there. I get that, but we also don't want them saying, oh no, this is just Otter Valley sneaking another gym in underneath a different name. So that's my only concern, is that because we have a job to pass a budget here, and we don't. It's just going to have to be transparent. I mean, maybe you guys do like a fundraiser for part of it, and then put the bond up, so that way
that's
so that
part
way
of
the
it.
community's involved ahead of time. So you're in front of people already, letting them know this is what we're doing,
Yep.
and then at that point, you know, you're out in front of the polls.
We had to go through the same thing with the lights.
Yep.
You know, there was a small handful of naysayers that kind of automatically made the assumption it was part of the school that was paying for that instead of private donation, and we just had to educate them. You know, but I don't think that's enough of a reason to not put this out there.
Oh, I mean, I 100% agree. We need something, because there's nothing in the area. There's nothing for our kids to do. I mean, we wonder why some of them are getting in trouble out of school, and then is we don't have a place for them to go, and I do agree. I just need to make sure there's a fine line that people know that this is, you know, if it's on Otter Valley land or whatever, it's still the Valley complex. It's not Otter Valley.
So I'm I'm open to being persuaded, but I'm not prepared tonight to say yes to you at all. And I want to raise a couple of doubts. First, I think it was Susan online. Working in concert with the School for Recreation is not the same as some of the deep needs we have for laboratory space, for I mean, I've been pushing for more money for tech ed for 5 years, haven't gotten it. So maybe I should come to see you to talk about that too.
You should.
Okay, I will.
No, seriously, like that's part of this conversation. Like, there's a need across all fronts, right? And we can all have a difference of opinion of which one's most important. Our personal feelings, like the only way to find this one out is to put it out to the voters. And personally, I don't see the harm in that, but I respect your position.
Yeah, so I actually agree that, I mean, Bill Moore's been telling me about the need for a rec center in Brandon for at least a decade. So I agree that it's necessary, but I am worried about the zero-sum implications that Lori brought up.
Totally get it.
And I'm also worried about an equity issue. I was just thinking the other day, it's related to what you're talking about, believe it or not. When I was 7, my mother took me to the Boston Public Library for the first time, and it was this miraculous place where I could get 2 books, whatever I wanted, and come back a week later and get 2 other books, and it was an endless, limitless supply, and it changed my life. I don't necessarily want a rec center where kids feel excluded, that they can't get in because they're not members, so their parents don't have the money for memberships. That's a real concern.
Oh yeah, the membership. I mean, there's totally ways around that. Like
Okay.
if you look at Rutland, there's voucher programs. This is to answer that exact concern. Actually, there's kids that can't get into Otter Valley right now to play. There's kids that can't get into Neshville to play. There's just such a shortage of space. Dude, I can't tell you how many kids from the school come to our workout facility at Nail and Bream to use the gym because there's not a viable.
Yeah, my
gym.
son goes.
It's like we want that, you know, but can't fit the whole community in there. So, yeah.
Just trying to tie it together.
Can I ask
Correct.
that? Are you done?
Yeah.
So Natalie has her hand raised online.
Hi there. Sorry, I'm coming a little late to this discussion. Do we know what the value of that piece of land is?
No.
You said it's roughly 10 acres. Has that been considered? Because I would like to know how much we're giving up, right, in value,
Can't use
before
it.
I wanted to make a
A
decision
lot of
on
film
this.
gonna have to be done.
To be completely honest, I think that we didn't think it would ever be able to be used. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, it's next to the road. It's not easily accessible. At least, I mean, it's far enough away. You know, if you have, it's like walking to the JV field almost from Otter Valley. And so I'm not sure that the school would have ever thought that putting a building there would make sense.
No, I
Possibly.
had proposed a middle school there, and I was told they couldn't because it wasn't big enough with the swampland.
Oh, right, okay. So
We already checked
all
in
right.
it apparently, so it's worthless to us basically.
Yeah, and our research shows the same. It'd have to be a pretty small facility to fit there.
Okay.
But again, Kevin, I appreciate we're not looking for expecting you guys to make a decision tonight.
Okay.
We know we just sprung a lot on you. We're just hoping you would consider it and talk about it and see if you would consider pledging it, not conveying it, just pledging it, so we could continue the effort moving this forward.
Natalie, does that answer your question at all? Or I mean, and I don't think we are ready to make a decision tonight. So,
As much as I love the idea of a rec center, I'm not ready to pledge that land, that piece of land in particular, right now.
okay. Brenda?
So I have a question and then I also have just some information. So I'd love to confirm semantics, right? So with all due respect to this board, you don't have the authority to give land away, only the voters do. So your question in regards to kind of a pledge so these people could move forward or not is, I don't know when that time and what that word would really look like, but at the end of the day, if this was a question you were asking the voters, it would be on the ballot in March, okay? And then the other question I had was more about the gymnasium and the conversations that we've had already about looking at a middle school. And it is at no conceptual design, right? So nothing is, so I don't want to mislead anyone to say that there is some sort of plan and what it might look like. But if we did something in a middle school that included a gymnasium, would this concept of a rec department still, would they complement each other? Would they be redundant?
I don't know as I have all the answers to that question. I mean, this doesn't just serve the children that go to school here. It also serves, and there's a huge outpouring need for adults and senior folks. You know, the walking track was one of the huge, it was overwhelming the response we got in that regard. So I don't know how you infuse that into a facility where you have security concerns about kids being in school there. That's in my mind where it locks up, but I don't claim to have that exact answer.
No, that's a good point. Thank you.
Have you have not talked to any of the select boards yet about this at all?
You're the first people we've spoken to.
First people, well,
We've been working on this for
We
2
had
years.
this-
We know we have a long road ahead
Yeah,
of us.
we
Seven
had this
select boards,
done maybe
trust me.
what, 6 months ago or so, and
Yeah,
we
you
saw
got
the
a lot of your
budget
plates at
crisis.
that.
We said we need to put this on ice. It's not the right time to present it, and honestly, maybe now is not the right time either. We just thought,
What is?
what the heck? When is there a good time?
I'll be honest. I was a little perplexed when I saw your proposal this morning when I looked it over and was like that we hadn't heard about this at all even before your conceptual plan, and I was a little disgruntled about that. Just because it is property that the school owns and you already have a concept and everything and we hadn't even been consulted. You know what I mean?
Well,
I
We're
know.
here now, but
I realize that, but
But also keep in mind, we did a lot of preliminary work before we even knew where it landed.
Okay.
We talked about north, we talked about south, we looked at a
Yeah,
lot of
there's-
different options.
2 other parcels that lend itself well to this, but they're not centrally located for all these communities to fall
Sure.
into. They're not within walking distance for the kids that go to school here. So that's why we came here first. If you guys say no, then that's where we're gonna go next. We'll go to one of those other lots. It just, in our opinion, it's not as ideal.
And also one of the biggest reasons why we kept it within our group, so that, you know, it didn't get out and then you heard secondhand. We wanted you to hear firsthand from us when it was the right time to present it.
This
Question
may
back
be.
here.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you mentioned the industrial park, are you talking about the former Brandon Training School area?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's like 2 lots left up
Yeah.
there that one of them lends itself pretty good, but it's like you think about that, how are kids gonna get there, and how that's not really inviting for folks from Pittsburgh and Chittenden. It's, you know,
Whatever happened to, because I can't recall, the old Brandon High School? Wasn't there something that, yeah, what? Yeah,
Thank goodness we don't own it.
He lives right next to
It's
it, so
falling
he would
on
know.
itself.
okay, never mind.
It's a long conversation.
Okay, never mind. Never mind.
So,
This is a premature question, but what's the model you've gotten from other places to say 4 towns say no and 3 say yes, or
That simply adjusts the numbers.
Correct.
So, yeah, we start with a 7-town pro forma, obviously, is if 5 towns elect and 2 don't, then that adjusts the numbers, which would have to go back for a vote.
Okay.
and then those towns that said no would be non-member, or would have to pay like a out of district
district membership.
membership.
Oh, yeah, that's an idea.
that sounds good.
Yeah. Again, like,
Sorry, yeah.
essentially,
We're hoping that doesn't happen.
I
We want
know,
this to be a community center for all
Right,
the
I get
communities
it.
that
I
come,
get it.
you know, and maybe we're just having John Lennon glasses on, but we want to give it a shot.
No, I mean I think we all want something like this. I mean we've had inklings of this before. I mean when we put out a bond a few years ago before COVID, we were talking about adding a gymnasium to Neshabie and adding another gymnasium here, I think, at the time.
Yeah, not to pat ourselves on the back, but like we saw that proposal, we saw the one that Pittsburgh put together, and I mean we spent a lot of time and energy to get to this point. There's some real science behind this. That's why we finally felt like it was time to present it to you.
And we all have kids that are, you know, in or coming or,
Sure.
you know, we've all graduated from here and
Question.
really, with our passion for coaching and, you know, teaching and really, you know, focus being on the kids and having something sustainable for quite some time, you know, that can be a little bit different from just, you know, the school, that bring other demographics and people and other communities together in, you know, a different facility.
And it is a community rec center, right? So yes, we want to host AAU tournaments. Yes, we want to host these events for our kids, but it opens up the opportunity for craft fairs and all these other things that now they're going to fill hotel rooms, now they're going to fill our restaurants, now they're going to fill our, you know, pump our gas, right? So it is a trickle-down effect, and that's what we're hoping for.
Have you talked to the chamber or planning?
Sorry, Jasmine's opened her. Let's
No, you guys are first.
As a student, I just have to say, it makes me really sad that you guys are just introducing this right before I'm about to leave.
We got that 2 years ago.
I think this is a great opportunity. I think a lot of students will see this as a place where they can hang out with their friends. Honestly, I think it will deter a lot of people from trouble, gives them a safe place to hang out with, safe activities to do. And I think it's just a great opportunity for the community. I've been to a gym in Middlebury, I've been to a gym in Rutland, and it would be really nice to see, in addition to all of those other things, a gym just like locally in Brandon. I really like it.
Thank you very much.
Kevin, go ahead.
You answered the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if they're not on your list, they should.
Michael,
Sorry,
I can
was
see
that-
your
If
hand.
the chamber's not on your list, it should be.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I think obviously if we can establish where this lives, then, you know, we need some public communication. We need some public input, and, you know, we need to work together with a host of community.
And we'll need more people, so we're hoping you guys will help too.
Because this board of 5 gets a lot bigger, and that's when all of a sudden logistics and, you know, operating starts to take over.
Michael?
Yeah, so I raised my hand and then lowered it a few times because I'm not sure if I'm saying anything novel here. You know, we're gonna I think in a little bit, talk about facilities needs across our buildings. And one of the things that we will probably say there is so many of our decisions about what to prioritize and what to do in the coming years come down in part to this lingering discussion about the middle school, as Brenda alluded to. So, I would just say that our thinking as a school about a rec center right nearby is a very different conversation if the middle school project is dead, or if if we're going out to bond next week with the middle school. So I just want the board to kind of hear from me that, Valley Community Center, other priorities we're going to talk about, a lot of that is a lot of how we'd operate it and what we prioritize in the coming years is really dependent on that middle school conversation. I just want to throw that out there for the board to consider.
Thank you. Other questions for our panel of 5? So my feeling is, you guys can tell me, I assume you want to get this started sooner than, get the ball rolling sooner than later. I don't want to hold you off forever. So what I'm going to ask the board to do is we will bring this back to our next meeting, which is in 2 weeks. Or it's the 1st of November, somewhere around there. And at that point we will discuss logistics from our end, and you're more than welcome to come and answer. Hopefully you will, so that you can answer any questions that we might have at that time. And then hopefully we can give you an answer so that we don't hold you up. Fair enough? Is that alright with everyone?
Extremely fair. Yeah.
Okay, so put your thinking caps on and questions and
Totally
process.
laugh us out of the room. So we're
No, we'll laugh after you leave. Oh, okay, alright, well then we'll have to wait till the meeting's over before we laugh. Alright.
So that's November 5th.
November 5th, okay. So that will be our next meeting.
We might be changing, is that right? Did we say we would?
It's a midday.
That's voting day.
That's voting day.
That's election day.
So the question is will everyone have already voted via their absentee ballot that they all got in the mail?
Absolutely not.
And I'm counting, so
okay.
I will be.
All right, so we'll talk about that towards the end of the meeting, whether or not we'll be meeting on the 5th or a day or so around there. But we'll definitely let you know what that is. Okay. Well, thank you for being here. We do appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Thanks for doing all the work too.
Yeah. So Brenda, you're now up. Presentation, 5 priorities for each building.
I think Renee will share for me.
Okay.
Is that the facility review?
Yeah.
Alright.
There's
Amanda Justin.
Yeah.
Elisa Hutchins. Okay.
Price.
Yep. And I think that's it, because those are the same people on the bottom. Laura King's behind. Sorry.
I know Laura.
Coming forward.
Ooh, okay.
No.
Okay.
I had Laura Peterson.
Oh, Laura, you live on the same street?
Oh, okay.
I think it goes up to it. Actually, something big enough.
Going on with this.
Isn't that funny? I had that problem too with the other one.
What is with the black?
I
What
don't
is the
know.
black?
It's like there's something. This one right here is the talking OB presenter.
Yes, we did. We eyeballed that.
There's gotta be some setting that says block those things or
I
not.
think that.
Yeah.
And if you go into the slideshow, it doesn't disappear.
I'm in the
That's
slideshow.
Oh.
I can't even see them.
Colby, do you know why there's these blocks on this?
I'm not sure. I don't know if Renee has a window open on top.
It's gotta be in the settings
No, just the only
of
gap
Zoom.
there is doesn't have
Yeah, the only.
I thought
Everything
it
else
was
is
intentional
closed.
because they wanted to
Okay.
hold the
I only have one.
suspense.
I have one.
I know, and that little box is just in the right place.
It was in the very
all the
place.
tabs of all the presentations for tonight.
Okay, well, we'll just roll with it, right?
Yeah, I think so. I
Okay,
might
we're good.
remember since it was hot off the presses.
Okay.
So in August, I think it was Natalie who said, what are your top 5 priorities? And we said, Wow, that's a really good question, but we didn't do it. So I, myself, the facility manager, and each principal, as well as head custodian, met, and this was kind of our guiding view. The board requested a presentation on where the facilities stand and how projects would be ranked. And so we're giving you the top 3 to 5. Every now and then there's a 6. Yeah, go ahead, thanks. So Lothrop, in alphabetical order. Lothrop's our oldest school, in case you didn't know. I found that little picture of the Lothrop addition down there. I think it was 1911 was when the main school, that little picture and the big one on the hill was done. And then over to the right is the town hall building, which we still call the town hall, but it is ours. It is the gymnasium and cafeteria. I was actually surprised you can't really see. You're right, Renee, it needs a new bulb. But it kind of looked like there was a cross in there. I thought that was interesting. And then it does, doesn't it? Because you get a better view than this. And then down on the left, or on the right, I mean, is the silo for the 2015 construction of a biomass boiler system. So it's a little bit of history and a little bit of Lothrop and their buildings. What's missing here is a picture of Caverly. As much as I could not find one this morning. I don't know why. So first I'm going to start with some good news, and I will tell you about this on a couple of other places. We had been awarded some K-12 indoor air quality ESSER funds that we could not get spent. We had bid it out 3 times. We couldn't get vendors to participate because they were small little projects and they had a small time frame. This was not universal. This was a universal problem, so the state applied for an extension and allowed us to amend our grant based on bids that we received before September 30th. So we amended the Lothrop grant and new things that took some priorities off that list is because this grant will now fund some air quality improvements, specifically a heat recovery unit in the gym and cafeteria, and heat pumps in the basement classrooms to help address humidity. As you all know, we currently have a sensitivity to mold. So throughout a lot of these conversations, mold was something on our mind, as well as the reality that our schools are becoming used throughout the summer and differences, and our summers are warmer. So on Lothrop, again, we kind of talked about the different buildings. All buildings, the first priority, and you'll see this universally, is safety and security. I'll be honest, I'm not going into the weaknesses because it's a public meeting. But we have interior and exterior security measures that we would like to do to make improvements. And one of the real challenges we have at Lothrop is the fact that we have those 2 facilities and students are walking in and out to the town hall building regularly throughout the day. Caverly, it was built in 1920. If you don't know, it's got a pretty cool history. It was a sanatorium for tuberculosis. That's why Pittsford is a sunshine village. And it is on the road to the haunted house. So it's kind of off to the right there. Frankly, when we met and talked about it, there's a fair amount of improvements that could be or should be done to that building. And it's important for you to know that it's redundant and there is space in the Lothrop building for that program. So we wanted you to know that. The things we would focus on, if you said this was a priority, would be climate control in the basement. We're struggling with moisture to the point where even on the floor that we service kids on, the paper feels it and kind of fights through the copier. We struggle with pest control. It's a 1920s wood frame building on a poured concrete slab. The doors are keyed and not keyless. They don't have the same type of control. And the bathroom is not ADA accessible. The town hall building, again, good news. We're going to add some heat recovery units to that building. Last year with some child care funds, we actually put heat pumps down in the cafeteria. And the priorities we saw in that building was the bathrooms in the cafeteria really need a remodel. They are
maybe perhaps original or close to original to the town hall building. The cafeteria and the gym both floors struggle with ADA facilities, bathroom facilities. There is an elevator there, so we have ADA accessibility nicely, but we are still struggling with bathroom facilities. And just a little bit on the gym, and I know we talked a little bit about what we looked at in the past. It is not regulation size. It does have a stage in it. There is literally very limited seating on the sides and in front of it for any games. And while we have a very attractive looking balcony, a historic balcony with, the woods railings and everything, it can only hold about 35 people because we don't have enough emergency exits to get out should there be an issue. So there's a lot of limitations on that just because of the age of the building. The main school building, again, that was a 1911 building with some upgrades. We are at our electrical panel capacity. That's just a FYI. That is not something that we would necessarily make any adjustments for unless we added something like an elevator or something that was a large electrical draw, and that's a little bit of cost of doing business, right? That's what happens. Classroom lighting, I was surprised, was not already LED. The hallways are and the common areas, but the classroom lighting is still outdated or older, less efficient lights. The windows on the library wing are 1980s vintage, so they have given us their life's worth and should be replaced or should be on the list. And some bricks in the basement are crumbling. This building was built to last. It's a solid building, a solid brick building with a solid slate roof. It's existed since 1911. We have a third-party report on what the facility needs are, as well as our own internal. And as you can see, a lot of them are our bones and structures in this facility are really good and strong. And then the grounds, I think if you've been there, you'll notice that the sidewalk is crumbling. There's actually some red, yellow or orange highlights indicating that. That is currently being planned and replaced with a grant through Safe Schools, Safe something to Schools. I forget the name of that. Safe Routes to Schools, thank you. Managed by a committee in the town. They were delayed a year because they couldn't find contractors. So it's on the radar. It hasn't happened yet, but we wanted to identify that as a problem. Neshabie. So Neshabie's biggest problem is space. We are beyond capacity. We actually have a modular unit that we use for offices and meetings. Safety and security, they have the same issue with children traveling between the Forestdale building, which is that brick building that you see on the left, and then the more modern looking Neshabie building on the right. Again, somehow I couldn't find the art building, which is the cutest little building in the world, but they are transferring between those all the time. We need ADA accommodations in the Forestdale building. So we make it work if we have to, because in the back of the building, it's at grade and people can come in, but that whole building is not accessible. There is no elevator to get to all of the floors, and that means there's also bathroom issues with accessibility in the Forestdale building. In the main school building, the Neshabie school building, which was Naylor and Breen's first commercial project. And I think it was 1980. You were probably not even born.
I was not.
I was not in this job then. I think it was.
It was later.
Was it later
It was
than
a
the 80s?
little later than the 80s.
82, I think. It was my first year in that building. My last year, I was 6th grade.
Okay.
1980.
There you go.
I'm trying to.
And so, ironically, do you know the roof on that building is 3 acres? Who knows these things, right? So the Neshabie School building bathrooms really need to be updated. They're very, very tired. And kind of related to number one, because we're at capacity, we really feel there's not enough bathrooms. And then traffic and parking. If anyone has been there, that's a real challenge. That's a challenge that we have been working with every year, trying to separate vehicles and parent drop-off and pickup with bus traffic, with walkers, to keep the pedestrian and vehicular traffic separated. Again, this building, with the exception of things, there was lots of things. This is 15 items long in our meeting. I only picked the top 5 that we all collectively agreed to. You know, there's certain things in the Forestdale building. Forestdale building has been chopped up and customized to our needs. But right in the center of the Forestdale building is actually a stage and would be a beautiful space if it wasn't needed for everything else. The Neshabie building itself is strong and solid. A couple of things that were frustrating is the ventilation units are loud and kind of new and big. And they were new. They were from the 2016-15 construction project. But the roof is strong. The boilers, a new biomass boiler in 2016. The windows, probably pushing their life because they're probably original. But there were no sort of real surprises in this building. The only place that has underground classrooms is the Forestdale building, and that's out in the back. So Neshabie has no basement. But space is the problem at Neshabie, and the fact that we are using every little closet that we can for either offices or classroom intervention, small size instruction, small group instruction. Otter Creek Academy, we have 3 buildings. The one that's blacked out we'll see later because that's Whiting. So on the left is Leicester, on the right, on the top is Sudbury, and then underneath we'll see Whiting in a few minutes. So Otter Creek, space. You've heard this for a couple of years from me now. We are beyond capacity. We have a modular unit for offices and meetings, and the nurse is in the modular unit. Safety and security, same thing. A couple of things is water and sewer. So at Leicester, we operate municipal water, and you may recall a few years ago, we went through a multi-year project to clean up PFASs in the water, and that has us now running our chlorination system 24/7. So we are municipal water for both the school, and we provide water for the town offices. We also have an in-ground septic system, and in Addison County, that's amazing and beautiful, and every night we pray it holds up. Because should that change, we are hoping rules and regulations would change, that we would have a viable solution besides pumping it. But just so you know, that is there. We operate 2 boilers in a redundancy fashion, and last year one of them died, and so it's new, 2024. But the other one is 16 years old, and they were both 2008 boilers. So we believe there may be some need for a boiler update at that facility. Just as an FYI, all of the modular units have their own climate control and heat, so they're not connected into the schools for that. The windows are 1985 vintage, and their parking lot really needs some resurfacing, as well as their basketball court. Just as an FYI, while Leicester is located in the flood zone, we have been really fortunate, and I don't believe in being jinxed, but we had no flooding in this summer of 2023 or this summer of 2024, or any problems with Irene.
Does it have a basement?
It does not have a basement. It is on a slab. And then good news here. again, that same K-12 indoor air quality grant was amended, and it will actually provide a heat recovery system for the multipurpose room, which already has heat pumps in it from a child care grant, and they're supporting enough to put heat pumps in each of the classrooms.
And they don't have any kind of a indoor space for gym, right? They just got a library. That's it. Classrooms, right?
They have a cafe gyminatorium.
They have a cafe
I can talk
gyminatorium.
all about that.
I
which
get
is
it.
yeah.
It is-
My husband taught
It's
Jim
pretty
in that
full.
for years.
It's very full, and their space is so limited that the adjacent garage, which I don't know if you can
On the end.
on the end. So if you look at that little building to the left of it, there's not a picture of it, but there's a garage right there. The kitchen staff have to go outside into the garage to get supplies to prepare meals, because that's the only place to
And
put
the gym teacher maintains all their stuff.
The lawnmower's in there too.
Yes, and I think actually the gym might have been now moved to a shed even farther.
Oh, even further, okay.
So, yeah, space is a real premium there. The classrooms at Leicester are beautifully sized. And that's where the size ends. Everything else is a real struggle. Okay, Sudbury. Sudbury, interesting enough, beautiful building. It's actually old because we've had some nail and brain construction done on that. I think I would have had a picture. But the interesting thing in regards to security here is parking and access is all behind the building. So people park behind the building and then walk down the side to come into the front door. There's no way to get in from the back, but there's also visibility. The windows are 1980 vintage because I do believe this was built in the 80s.
Yep.
They are large and beautiful and inefficient, and many can't be opened, and or we use sticks to prop them open and to lock them.
Since 1987.
Since 1987. So climate control is an issue here. It is passive solar, but it is hot in the summer. And the students in this program, the Bruce Academy is held here, have summer programs and will always have summer programs, and need better climate control because some of them may not be able to regulate heat and cool themselves. So having a climate control facility is really beneficial to them. And then number 4, not a huge big deal because we have supervision, but the playground's not suitable for the students. So the playground that's there was once an elementary school and is suitable for elementary school students, but not for these students.
Is there a reason why they were not part of the climate control grant?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. That climate control grant was written in 2000 and
It was not in use at that.
Maybe it wasn't in
not
use.
in use.
Okay.
Nobody was in it.
It was not in use. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. That's why.
Yeah.
Good
Okay.
memory.
I was just asking.
Well, we keep track. We take care of the apple trees.
You watch. Fernanda was
My
when I
husband-
met Fernanda. She was a principal. So.
And my husband takes care of the apple trees there, so
Still.
he still does. So he goes every year. So that's, yeah.
So Otter Creek Academy at Whiting, security, the exterior doors have been updated to keyless entry, but there are still exterior doors with keys. And that's something that we don't really love. We have a partnership with a third-party childcare there, so that adds more exposure, which is more the reason why we would like control with keyless, with these cards versus keys. There are 4 classrooms at Whiting. It's a brick building, fairly new roof, fairly new boiler. The 4 classrooms, 1 is in the basement and 3 are on the top floor. The classroom floors have all been updated, but the main hallway and entrance is still needs to be updated, and we are like 99% certain it's asbestos underneath. We do not have any ADA accessible bathrooms. Climate control is another important thing because one of the classrooms is underground with a walkout. And then the playground. This building is used for preschool, and there's a playground there for K through 6. So there's a playground that's not suitable just for the age of students in that building, and the parking lot is too small. It is also dirt, and because it's too small, people are making parking spaces, which is creating mud and
Mud.
Otter Valley Union Middle High School. A couple of pictures here that I thought I wanted to show you was the new entrance on the top right, and then what it looked like before. So after the piazza was put in, the patio area, but then how much different it looked by putting that awning that really said, this is a school and not a factory. On the second in the middle column, that's a view of the library on the back. So that's the south side of the building. And then I think over again on the top, the far on the right, is our big solar array, which I think is pretty impressive. That went in 2015, and that covers a significant amount of our electric cost. So in the summer, we pay no electric bill whatsoever, and some of those credits carry over into part of September, and then each month we pay a lower electric bill than we used to because of that array. And I don't remember what's underneath those, but not that important.
It's just a picture of the front.
Okay, just a picture of the front. So our number one is a new middle school. We're at capacity with 1 3-classroom modular unit right out here. Whether it's a standalone facility, whether it's a wing or an addition on the existing building, you know, that kind of feeds some of our priorities. That's one of the things that's hard for us to identify all of our priorities, is knowing that space is our biggest priority. We are all very familiar with mold remediation and prevention. It's looking like the mold in the middle school remediation is somewhere around $110,000 to $150,000. And I think Michael can answer, but I think the classrooms are ready for them to come back to. So hopefully we're moving back soon. Teachers need time to get in there and reset up their classrooms, but we are very sensitive to what happens there. Safety and security, same as everywhere else. So that includes things like the locks, both interior and exterior, the doors, visibility, cameras. The boiler, you've heard this. We've been struggling with uneven heat. We've been struggling. We had, I can't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago, where we actually had to close because we didn't have heat. And one day where, I don't know, I think we hunkered down, but it was cold. We need to update circular pumps, replace and update the fuel boiler. The fuel boiler is somewhere around 35 years old. So again, at its capacity. And then the gym needs that we recognized was climate control. And gym needs were kind of like gym everything, right? So we have a weight room off the back of between the, that's the game. By the wing with the locker rooms. And that space is limited. It's very small. It's not secure. It's too small. Honestly, the space between equipment is frighteningly close. If someone were to fall, they could hit equipment instead of just hit a protected surface. So the space is too tight. Sound in the gym, whether it's panels to help with the sound. And then all of the basketball nets or hoops that kind of come down, up and down, are well beyond their useful life. And those babies cost $30,000 each to replace.
Each side?
Yes. There's 6 of them, they tell me.
Yes, there are.
And then the kitchen and the cafeteria. That's all original. So the cafeteria is the cafeteria. But the kitchen itself and the serving line is very 1960, 1970.
It's about to come back into.
Yeah, it might be coming back. But it's
original. It's 61.
it's tired and tired. That, I think, includes it. Is that the last slide?
Yep, that's it.
So I don't know if you have any questions. Just to kind of give you a heads up, we have lots of reports. So I'm more than happy to share with anyone who is interested in our notes that we talked when we sat and met with the facilities team and the principals, so that we had both the perspective of the facility but also education and instruction and what was lacking for delivery. We also have a report that the Agency of Vermont commissioned to have all schools in the state identify what the facility needs were. That was used in driving it. Really, Otter Valley had the biggest. The others on that report were really minor and more cosmetic. That report is helpful in identifying some of the areas that need attention, but was way off the mark in identifying cost. I think they said we could rebuild Otter Valley for something like $26 million.
Oh, wow, let's do it.
Sign them up.
Maybe it was
I know,
62,
really.
but you'd still laugh, wouldn't you?
Be a lot more.
You're still laughing. And then we have our own facility operating plan where we kind of go through it every year and do things like, what type of roof do we have? How old is it? How old are our windows? What type of floors do we have? How old are they? Yeah.
Can I ask a question? So, of all those things, all those priorities, what has been budgeted for? Like, and how many of those things are things that we would tackle out of what's already been budgeted and approved? Like the grant is going to help take away a little bit of those climate control issues.
They weren't
perhaps.
put on the list.
Oh, they weren't put on the list. Okay.
So those little new slides, I had
Yeah.
already taken the climate control issues off the list for those 2-3 schools.
Okay.
So they were not. So that's a really good question. We have the facility fund, which
Right.
we come to you every spring with a proposal of what to do that summer. And these are the type of things that would land on that,
those, right.
with the exception of number 1 on the
Right.
Otter Valley list, which
Right.
is a construction project. What is becoming challenging is where and how much to keep investing in a school that you might say someday we want to configure differently. And that's what we're hoping for some guidance from you on, is if we're doing a middle school, what would it look like? And then what would we need then at the other schools that have space issues, which is OCA, Leicester, and Neshabie. Because as you look at some of the lists on there, if we were doing big construction project, we would incorporate those improvements into it and not try to do them with the facility fund.
Yeah.
Answer your question.
It does answer your question. Thank you.
Questions for Brenda?
So I know that some other middle schools incorporate 6th grade. Are we thinking about doing that to ease the elementary school?
I think we're thinking about doing everything.
5th and 6th, right?
We've
Just
had
six.
conversations
Just
both.
six.
I
Just
think
six.
6 only, 6 or
Yeah.
7. It what that does, interesting enough, is it doesn't really do anything at Leicester because it's very often a multi-age. So moving 1 grade out doesn't create any new space there, so it would not alleviate their needs. At Neshabie, it will take three classrooms, and so it may alleviate needs at Neshabie. It doesn't address some of the things that I had talked about, like the Forestdale building really being chopped up for educational services because we needed something and we needed space. We have between, if you've ever been in the multi-purpose room, which should be put on, that should be that there's not a full gym. If you've been into that cafe gym, no auditorium, or is there an auditorium there too?
No, there's not.
If you've been into the cafeteria gym, between there and the library is what was designed to be storage. It's actually offices.
Well, there's some storage in there too, but yeah.
I think there's some storage in there too, but it's offices.
Boiler room, IT office, and special services.
Yeah.
Brett, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have not really a question, I guess, but just thinking out loud, I guess. You know, it seems to me that, you know, we have two elementary schools that are overloaded and Lothrop that's maybe underloaded. 20 years from now, it could be exactly the opposite. We don't really know how things are going to change over time. So how do we guard against having these conversations every 10 to 20 years about capacity in our schools if we're always chasing the demographics of today, right? So I guess what I keep coming back to is we could put a bunch of money into aging schools, but is that going to fix the long-term problem? It seems like the long-term problem is really we should have one elementary school, one high school, one middle school. And that's probably an unpopular opinion, but I mean, from what I'm seeing and hearing, it's like we could nickel and dime ourselves trying to keep what we have, or maybe we should be thinking bigger.
So Pittsburgh can drive all the way to Waiting, put it in Waiting?
I can. So one of the things that we're almost finished with is that we requested that a demographic study take place of our 8 towns and of the students who are in our buildings currently and our buildings, the students who are recently born through age 5, and then also beyond that, the 5 years after that. So we should have that information available within the next month, so that way we can present it to the board, so you can see what the 8 towns are saying, what our facilities say about where our demographics, or I should say our population, our enrollment is planning on going. And so we'll be able to have some data to help us make those decisions.
So in other words, we're guessing on birth rates, and we have never, to my knowledge, done that as this district. We've always kind of looked at trends and made guesses, but not estimates on birth rates. And their process is, you know, it's a scientific methodology. It's not. It's more in depth than I would have done.
And it's going to be taking into account the dip in birth rates as a result of COVID.
A couple of things to just remind people, Brett. It's a good question. It's a good point. It's good to know what facilities still have debt and what goes with that. So Otter Valley here still has debt. The last construction project was 2015, so 20 years from 2015. But that's
35.
35. I'm not good at these little
You could have
numbers.
done that.
See, that's next year. Thank you. Neshabie was 2014, and Lothrop was 14 or 13. So those are the oldest, and then Whiting comes off in 2028, so that's coming off soon. But that plays into it, not that that should be the only decision making, but should we not use any of those facilities during that time period as a school, and depending on what we do, we may owe money back on municipal borrowing. Also, school buildings don't hold a lot of value in resale.
Unless we make it into, well, yeah, we could make it into teacher housing.
Teacher house.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
So I have a question.
Teacher housing.
What about, you know, you talk about windows and doors and heating systems, but I'm curious about the water systems throughout these buildings. If you've ever been down in the tech center, downstairs or in Muslimu, and you look up, you see, you know, pipes that are
dripping.
well, they're not dripping, but they certainly don't look healthy. And, you know, they're original to this building. And at what point do we look at that and say we need to think about replacing sections of our buildings, not just Otter Valley,
Well,
with
I
new
think
piping?
I think that's a good point, and Kevin mentioned that, and it is right. I'm going to actually lean on Tanner. He doesn't even know this. But you know, that means our pipes are 1961 version, right?
So black iron, right?
I'm not. I hope not. I'm not sure if people ever proactively repipe or if they reactively respond. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a loaded question, but
Right?
I mean, there's
Which-
a lot going on right now just with the lead content that's in a lot of the fittings, the older fittings, the older pipes. A lot of that's getting changed out now. It's becoming a very big deal. They've gone to 0% lead content. So you see different parts of the country where it's a major deal. Haven't seen it in Vermont so much yet. But.
Well, I guess I'm just worried about, you know, sections like when bathrooms start leaking and things like that. You know, you fix the little leak, but should we be going bigger than that and fixing piping all the way back to something bigger than just that one little leak?
Yeah. So
You said you had a CNA, Brenda? Capital Needs Assessment by a third party?
yeah.
So those reports will identify that for you and give you a lifespan for your infrastructure. It breaks it down by component.
Is that the one from the state?
Yeah. He was written in Greek.
Yeah, it's like anything, depending on who produces it. It can say what you want it to say, but
It was done in a whirlwind fashion around the state, so it
Yes.
probably
Really
wasn't as
tool
in depth as we needed to be.
Yes. And I called them and said, I have everyone's but Otter Valley's. And they go, we don't have an Otter Valley. I'm like, yeah, we do. So ours came even quicker and later, but I'm happy to share that with you, and maybe you could help translate some of those. Definitely when we do improvements, like when we did the lobby over and we put the new bathrooms, obviously we address all the plumbing then. I would guess that if it's a leak, it's about intensity and frequency. If it's easily fixed by one little thing, that's what we do. If that consistently continues to break, then we go larger.
Well, I'm thinking about the flooding that continues to happen in the East Wing, and we've talked about the fact that is original to the building, or when that section was put on.
Flooding that continues to happen in the East
So
Wing.
is the East
in the bathroom?
So
in
is
the bathroom.
In the bathroom.
Yes, those bathrooms are original and they are 30 years old.
Right, and they continue to flood for whatever reason.
So if we put the middle school in the East Wing, we can fix that problem.
Isn't the middle school already in the East Wing?
But if we
if you build on it.
we build on it, we
Oh,
fix
yes.
it, we add it,
Yes.
add on to it, then that gets that problem fixed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That probably should have been on the list.
Well,
It was one of those that were identified.
Okay.
Did I miss any, Michael? I see you're there. Otter Valley's was the
No, that was the one that I was surprised to see was not on there.
That was 4:30 this afternoon.
But those are just things that I think about too. Is that when you're looking at any building, whether it's your home or whether it's a public facility, it's not just the roof and the outer jacket that needs to be taken care of. It's also the inner workings, the pipes, and because if it floods and takes everything out, you're gonna, So that's kind of what my concern is.
We hear you.
Okay.
What was the number he said for having a new Otter Valley?
26 million.
It might have been 62. But he said go for either.
I mean, look at Woodstocks. They came in at $100 million. Right?
Yeah, I think Winooski 4 years ago was 90 million.
What's the square footage of the school here?
Big. It'd be big. It'd have to be at least.
I don't know how many
100 million, I
acres
think.
this roof is. I only know Nashville's.
Yeah, new builds are coming in cheaper than retrofits, so something to consider along the way.
And the reality to think about is, what does that look like? like where our students housed. New builds are not gonna happen during the 9 weeks of summer.
No.
Macy's in Burlington might be open.
Macy's is opening up. Aren't they doing something with the Diamond Run Mall too?
Yeah, a new Walmart.
Oh, really?
Oh, so downtown
Super
Rollins opening
Walmart
up.
at the Diamond Rim Mall, 2027. So we could go into the old Walmart while they're,
Doing the new one, right?
right, while they're rebuilding our school. We could go down there, next to the train station.
Brenda, is what you're saying that if you knew you were going to expand the middle school, say here at Otter Valley, just hypothetically, that aids you enough decision making to them and inform what happens at the rest of the locations?
I think so, yes. Because I think it would be very unlikely that we wouldn't touch them at all, but we'd be able to prioritize what we needed and whether we needed to do some interior modifications as well, whether we'd have the ability and the flexibility. So for example, if we took 3 classrooms out of Neshabie, that frees up space, might we reconfigure it to add more bathrooms, to do some of the other things?
Right.
So it kind of starts with that question.
It starts with that question, that's the first domino.
Which is a question that's been on the table for how long?
Well, it was on before COVID, and then went off because of COVID, and now we're playing with it. But we also know how things are precarious and financially out in the world right now, and so we can talk about it. But I don't think saying, "Ooh, let's put a bond out for a middle school in March" is a smart move on our part. So I think we need to do a lot more research, such as what they've done with their community center, to determine where we're going to do this. And I mean, if we could do it in the next 3 years, wouldn't that be lovely to decide? But we need to decide what we're doing with our middle school before we can really say what we're doing with the rest of the.
Any
Like
grant
Brenda alluded to.
money left for us to do that?
I don't know if Brett has his hand up.
Yeah, he does. Brett.
Yeah, I know we've talked about this before a little bit, talking about the middle school, but it would be really nice to have a conversation about what happens to our other facilities if we did have that middle school, right? I mean, would we need 3 elementary schools? Would we need modulars? What would that look like, I guess? And obviously we probably aren't prepared to talk about it tonight, but I think that's important to have those conversations.
Well, that would definitely be part of our conversation, I think, as we're talking middle school, what happens to the other facilities. I mean, hopefully, what I would hope for is that if we brought 6th grade here, that we'd be able to get rid of our modulars, because they're only supposed to have a 5-year lifespan. And we're in year 3.
Well, they have a longer lifespan.
I realize that, but yes, I realize that.
But yes, if I can add, I think, Brett, you're right. So freeing up 3 classrooms in Neshabie adds some relief, and it is taking 2 out of Lothrop. So you're providing some relief to Neshabie, and you're making Lothrop smaller. Years ago, we had a conversation that was not well received about looking at who goes to Neshabie versus who goes to Lothrop, and whether we say we're a unified district and this line that was once typically Neshabie or Brandon now is going to go to Lothrop or not. None of those conversations, but those are things to throw out on the table.
Well, I think some of the arguments that we heard then are arguments that we're going to continue to hear, but
absolutely.
Longer bus rides are going to unfortunately have to happen at some point.
Mm-hmm. And we have long bus rides.
Right.
I don't want people to be.
No, but that was
we have short ones because
no,
we don't.
Right? They're 45 minutes. Some are up to an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, those are all conversations and arguments that we've heard for not reconfiguring schools and whatnot. So yeah.
What was the proposal from years ago? Just because I don't know. Was it like, I don't know.
Oh,
Neshabie is 3 through 6 and Lothrop's K through 2, or I mean. Or
No.
was it just like redistricting?
It was more like redistricting. Both schools, Lothrop and Neshabie, would both remain K through 6 or preschool through 6, but there would be a dividing line, and and it would be somewhere in Pittsford or maybe
Brandon.
Neshabie, Brandon.
You'd
Yeah,
have to take from Brandon.
right. We had
and
to
put
take from
Pittsburgh.
Brandon, so there would be many Brandon kids that would go to Lothrop, and there was just an argument about sending our kids up and down Route 7 on buses, and that if they lived in Brandon, then they should be going to Neshabie because that was their town school, and same thing with Lothrop. So that was so when we talk about wanting people to come to a meeting, they came to that meeting. The auditorium was full.
It was at Leicester. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was also conversations that didn't really come to fruition about whether we look at a Neshabie being a K4 and Lothrop being a, whatever that might look like. But again, if it was something like that, much like these people here, Otter Valley is central. And for a Sudbury first grader or kindergartner to say Lothrop was the K1, 2, that's a long drive.
Yeah.
From
Especially when you're
Sudbury
picking
to
up all
Lothrop.
of the other towns to get there.
Redistricting seems to make a lot more sense.
We're too rural.
Yeah.
Both are
Well, except
We've got a lot of we've got a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah.
Whiting to Pittsburgh.
it's tough to redistrict though, right? Because like sports are done by town lines, not by school district lines.
Sports are all
I don't
Well,
know.
that's not true. The rec departments are starting to work more and more hand in hand. Brandon and Pittsford recs are working more in tandem, and all of the kids from Whiting and Sudbury and Leicester, if they want to play sports, go to the rec in Brandon. So
That's workable.
It's not a popular option.
No.
To be frank.
Well, just talking about the middle school, right? I mean, just to put the elephant in the room on the table, right? Lothrop's already got excess capacity. Building a middle school would increase that amount of excess capacity. It would also offload, classrooms from OCA and Neshabie. So at some point, you're just adding operating costs. You're not actually, the student outcome, it might improve with the middle school model, but you're adding operating cost. And, as we've seen, that's kind of a tough ask to keep, trying to nickel and dime folks for operating costs to keep a school open that's only half full. So, that has to come into account when we talk about a middle school.
well, it will have to come into account, Brett. We don't know what's going to happen to. We never suspected that Leicester was going to be at capacity and needing a modular when we redistrict the schools and put them back together. Never thought that was going to happen. But we also don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 years or 3 years. So who knows what could happen? We could lose a lot of students in the next couple of years based on many varying factors.
We got a strong hint 2 weeks ago that 5 years of state may come up with a different plan.
We do have that demographic study. It's not going to be a guaranteed map, but it's
Right.
another piece of data.
Michael?
Thanks, Lori. I've been the principal here for 2+ years, and am running out. I would say that I've heard this conversation a few different times. I'm curious, and I would just encourage the board to think about what would be really useful from us in order to help make a decision about the middle school. Because again, that's what you all are talking about as sort of the hinge point as well. Like what do you need from your administrators to know how to move forward, or if you want to move forward?
Concept.
Where to build it? Okay,
I-
build it somewhere else.
I think we've already decided that part only because we've looked at other spots. We looked at in Pittsford, and we decided that that was not a good spot.
No,
there.
I meant down there or hook it to the buildings.
Yeah, so we can. I think we've also talked about that building a separate building. We don't think that the community would appreciate that. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think we've determined that we need to add on to Otter Valley if we're going to add the 6th grade to come here. Now the question that still remains is whether we add on this side or whether we add on this side. And what we've talked about, and we haven't come to any agreement, is that this side has the cafeteria, it has the library, and if we could push out that way, which may be not very happy, our baseball fans may not be very happy, but we would possibly be pushing that into that a little bit. But we don't know what the space needs are at this point. We haven't come up with any conceptual framework that says this is what this would look at, and we also have not said, here, let's do a study, throw some money at our architects and say, here, show us what a concept would look like if the 6th and 7th grade and 8th grade were over here.
Michael, I think that there's relatively little you can do because the sticking point is financial.
Yeah.
That, Tanner says $100 million for a new Otter Valley. These numbers are scary, and when I sit here at these conversations, what I'm thinking about is what will people vote for. So developing a plan that we can say is the best bang for the buck, and then campaigning hard for people to vote yes. It's a scary proposition, but we have to think about finances almost first.
The other thing I forgot to mention was that there's also the possibility, we've talked about the middle school being over here, but maybe we keep the middle school in the old part and we move the high school into the new part as well. So I just wanted to add that. Natalie.
I feel like we need an expert to help us with this. I mean, you're right. We've been talking about this for a while, but I'm not really willing or want to make decisions because I don't feel like I have the information I need to make an educated decision. So I would want to know, do we need a facility inventory and utilization of space study somehow of all of our buildings, right? And what is the best use? I mean, maybe we need to think about selling some buildings or letting go of some buildings. I don't know if we've actually talked about that. And we always talk about all the different options, but none of us are really experts in this. And I would prefer to have some kind of study that I could look at and be like, here's all your options, here's what it costs, here's the best use of your space. And I don't feel like I have any of that information in front of me to make a good decision.
You have an idea where we could go for that? Either of you?
I mean, you could put out an RFP.
There's multiple prongs to that request.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
not typically one person or one entity.
Well, that's what I was-
do all that. But I mean, you're looking for the data points to make an informed decision now, right?
Right.
You look at, I'm not trying to use our slideshow as an example, but I will. It has a budget, it has a conceptual drawing, it has the reasons how you came to those conclusions. It gives you kind of the data points to move the ball forward versus circular conversations, which are well intended, but you don't gain much for traction. So,
Right, I mean, you have.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's not just one person, it's probably a combination of firms that get together and come up with a plan. And you have an architect and you have a planner and, it costs money, but you put out an RFP for what you need and then you see what comes back. But I feel like it's making a decision on all the little tiny bits of information we have is not enough. I think we need to have like really hard conversations about, do we need all our buildings? But we can't have that conversation without the study to show us what's wrong with it. I hate the idea of making all these little tiny improvements on things and putting our money in places where we should be putting it somewhere else.
Okay. Brett?
I don't think I've ever said this before, but I agree with everything that Natalie said.
Okay. All right. So then my homework is in the next month it is to determine who those experts are and to see if you guys are willing to put some money into that when we get together in a month.
What we need, Lori, is a proposal, a request for proposal that's written.
Right.
You don't determine who those people are.
No,
We
no,
write it,
but
and then
no. I guess what I meant was my homework was to figure out, if we've. I think what we need is for our next meeting is to have that request and then determine, how to change it or fix it to something that we want. That's more what I meant.
Can I help try to focus it a little bit?
Sure.
What are the data points that you want to measure, Natalie, specifically? If you could craft that into a specific list, that you could then break that into probably a couple different RFPs that you could put out for different services.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think one of the questions that I was going to ask as a clarifying point is, that's very broad, right? Like, are you willing to close a school that still has debt? Are you willing to look all the way to a consolidated elementary school? I think I'm not, I'm not sure how to provide or where to provide some of those conversations without kind of knowing what or is really the sky's the limit, bring us anything.
Right, you'd have to define some general guardrails.
Because you ask anyone, and I think Renee said it earlier, the truth is, it's cheaper to build than renovate. And so if the sky was the limit, we'd be...
But yes, because if we end up building, it's great. The middle school will be probably cheaper to build, but this building will still have need, right?
So will all the
that
grade
will
schools.
not be resolved by
As
a new
will
building.
all the grade schools.
As will all the other grade schools. So it's not necessarily going to be cheaper for the system to build a new middle school. So, but that is something to consider, right? Like the cost differential between building a new middle school and renovating buildings versus adding to the middle school, solving a few of the problems that we currently have in the high school, and then being able to have room and access for the other buildings. So I'd like to see both. I would like to have a comparison between, this is what, it's cheaper to do it this way. Well, then show me, that it's cheaper to do that and fix this than it is to just fix this and then have money left over for others. I just want to see that, because I don't think we can decide that without having some real data.
Brenda, if we were to commission our own building studies that are more in depth, does that give us an idea of? It'll certainly give us the things that need to be repaired to get it up to code and to modernize it. Does that also come with like kind of a monetary amount that we would have to consider spending in order to do it at that, at that day that we get the study?
So here's some of my thoughts. Being respectful of taxpayers and history, and looking at a school like Lothrop that has really strong everything and not enough people. That's one problem. I don't know. The other problem is Vermont doesn't really love you abandoning these big buildings, and they're not a real proponent of building new facilities all over the place and abandoning buildings. And I'll tell you, there is not a lot of value in these buildings. Abandoned schools are not a hot market. Maybe I like your idea, Renee, of changing it into housing, maybe, but I don't know. I mean, do you really have the appetite to say you're going to close a Neshabie or a Lothrop? Because if you do, then it might be worth spending $100,000 for this type of study. But if you never have that appetite, that too might not be a good investment.
I think we set the parameters, you know, Neshabe probably wouldn't be part of one of the buildings we're looking at, but maybe Whiting, you know, that's a building that could be sold.
It has debt on it, so.
Yeah, but we have to look at it. Oh, this isn't gonna go away. We have to figure out, when we do something to one building, it's gonna affect what we can do to other buildings. So we need to think about the entire picture, not just one building at a time. And I feel like we don't have a study that shows us the entire picture, and that's kind of what I wanna see.
Brett?
Yeah, you know, I think if we talk about the length of a bond, right? Let's say it's a 30-year bond. We really should be looking at what are going to be the anticipated upkeep costs of our existing facilities over that entire bond, right? Because that tells us what is it going to cost us to keep what we have versus, you know, investing in our school now. And then we really need to see, in addition to, you know, the money around the building, right? What is our savings in operating costs if we have, you know, 2 elementary schools versus 3, or 1 versus 3, and a middle school? I mean, and, you know, from the administration, right? I mean, what are the anticipated savings? Kind of a cost-benefit analysis to say, okay, if we build this, if we build a 6 through 8 school, you know, we're going to have to close another elementary school, and, you know, that's really critically important for us to know before we would even want to ask voters for a middle school. And then, you know, what can we anticipate the costs of that being? And if we didn't close a school, what can we anticipate the cost adder on an annual basis to be, right? We just need all those numbers and some sort of a cost-benefit analysis so that we can make an educated decision. It's not just a feasibility study to say, yeah, we think it would be nice to have a middle school here. We need real numbers, right? I mean, and the voters are going to want that too. If we can't say we're going to save you, you know, $5 million in operating costs over the 30 years of the bond, then it's probably going to be a pretty tough sell.
Yeah, I agree with Brett. I mean, we need to have the
They need to be aligned more.
costs associated with it. You know, and maybe it's we have a phasing plan that shows here's what you do in the first 5 years, and then the next over 10 years, and we need a really good plan for what to do with our facilities, and I don't think we have the expertise to do it.
So they got to come up with $100,000 for that.
Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
So,
They got to come up with $100,000 to do that.
So I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around what you need from me or how I can help facilitate this process. A couple of things that I'm hearing and I understand, and some of it, so it's interesting because, you know, Brett said we need to know how much we're spending and what we would save if we had a consolidated middle school or a new middle school. And it all comes down to definition, right? So I can easily tell you how much we've spent by operating all of our facilities over the last 3-5 years. I can tell you that by sight. I can tell you that probably if I had time and a good computer in 10 minutes, right? So, but that's just operating the facilities. That's cleaning, that's heating, electric, utilities, you know, that type of thing. Then on top of that is the educational component of operating the facilities. So, you know, again, we had this conversation about a middle school. If it was a standalone middle school, then there is infrastructure costs that would maybe be additional to what we have right now. We may be able to move a principal over, or we may need a new principal. We may be able to move an administrative secretary over, or we may be able to shift and move. So there's all those operational costs that go with doing the building. At the end of the day, you have 2 elementary schools that are in very good condition, that have not the right capacity based on town lines or school configuration. And you have one that is stretched too thin and is challenging because of that. You know, the only, you know, whether that means you sell Lester, you have to find a place to put 78 kids. And Whiting, you have to find a place to put 15, which is really 25 because of the way the program is. So I can maybe meet with my friend Tanner and he can convert some of those reports, because the report that we have for Otter Valley, we have for every district. Again, I caution you that the Agency of Education commissioned these reports not so much for our community's utilization, but so they would know as a state what our facility conditions are like. But I'm certain that there is good information in there. It may not be perfectly complete, but it is good information, as is the history of what we've been spending. But at the end of the day, we don't have enough kids at Lothrop, and we have too many kids at Neshamie, and that's still going to be the statement at the end.
By adding a middle school, we're just gonna we might alleviate Neshamie, but we're not gonna help
We
both.
might add, so talk about that. If we added a middle school and alleviated some of the stress at Neshamie, we wouldn't alleviate enough of the stress to close Lester.
So then
and
you're
move them in.
still talking about have to move that line.
So I'm still at the point where I have no capacity at Neshamie and excess capacity at Lothrop.
I just think the whole timing of this, with us just having some historic tax increases and then trying to go for another bond on top of that, we're really in a tough point to try to sell this to the community.
Nobody disagrees with that.
I'm just looking over the things from August 2019 from the task force, thinking, darn COVID, we were just poised. We'd done all this research about where to possibly site a middle school and all like different options, and then COVID. And then coming out of it, we have all these expenses that make and budgets that fail. That now we can't just say, "Oh, let's go ahead with the plans that."
Right, we were close, and then the rug was yanked underneath us, and now we're starting.
Yeah, because a lot of the questions that are being asked, we had looked at a lot of them already, but the numbers are all different and the needs are different.
I heard this when the representatives were here. I mean, they basically told us we're going to have to be creative to get our budgets to pass, and we got to keep that in mind when we have to be creative to make a budget pass, and we're talking about adding a bond on top of that now too. So, you know, we have to think about the whole picture of the community too to get this to work.
I don't think we're talking about a bond for this year.
No.
I want you to be aware.
You're
Right. No, I know that. Well, I did, the way he was talking, it made it sound like we were going to add that this year, and it wouldn't be this year, but
we might need to be creative whenever.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
You may want to do some community input now. You may want to consider even a non-binding article to talk about at the annual meeting.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is we don't usually get a lot of people. However, as Lori pointed out, when you throw some of these ideas out, you do get a lot of people who come forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize this is a big ask for you guys because I sit next to you with the budgets and really believe and feel for the affordability of schools and not really knowing what the appetite. You've heard it. You know, as you said, you 13 know about this and have known about it since 2019. I'm not 100% sure if our whole community knows the level that you know. And whether they, you know, if they go to a school like Neshamie or OCA, they know it, but does everyone in Pittsford know it? Does everyone who doesn't send kids to school know it? Or would it come out of the blue to them? What do you mean? We don't have to. What do we have to do facilities for?
It would come out of the blue. It's one of the dilemmas. I spent the last 45 minutes, besides listening, also staring over Brent's head at the window frame over there. I don't sit on this side very often. and you know, it's crumbling up there. Look, if you look at the ceiling,
That was on the list.
yeah. You know, if this building were built to last as long as Lothrop, it would be 2074. I don't see this building making it to 2074. So we have to accept that we're going to be going to the taxpayers and saying, in the next few years, it's going to cost a lot more to improve these schools and keep them open, and we have to be planning on that. I don't know what to call it: discussion, fight, sales job, argument to convince people, because that's what it's going to take. No, we don't have any good options. We're talking about millions and millions of dollars to do anything we're thinking about, and it's our job to go to the community and say, your children need this. And if we fail to do that, the bond issues will fail, and the schools will just crumble. So the strategy of how do we approach this, how do we convince people, what do we say, we have to have that, as well as these studies of what the buildings need and the best options for spending the money, because we will fail unless we convince the public that their children need this.
And I think it's critical for us to be proactive, because Natalie put in the chat something about facilities master plan or something like that. Because if we don't think about it now and come up with a fairly strong plan now, it's going to cost a lot more in the future when we're having to react to something that isn't that happens all of a sudden, and then we would have to close a school because something happened.
Brett?
I guess what I'm thinking is, if there isn't a savings of some kind, right, by building a new school, then why would we do it? We're only adding burden to people that are already burdened, right? So we have to look beyond, we have to look at demographics, we have to look at our existing space, and maybe it's, you know, we have to build a middle school and we have to add 5 classrooms to Neshabie, or, you know, I don't know what the answer is, right? But we have to look at it from the whole picture and say, here's what it's going to take in order for us to be able to meet our children's needs and also have it be affordable, right? I mean, obviously we can't add a middle school if we can't do something with one of our elementary schools, because that would just be adding more burden. It doesn't save anything, it only costs more. So, you know, I think trying to find a creative approach, and I don't know what that looks like. Maybe that means one of our elementary schools becomes a middle school. I don't know, but, you know, I agree. I think this is beyond where we can make that decision ourselves, and we really probably should spend some money to get an expert.
They're going to look for your opinions, though, too, right? Like, the expert's going to look for your feedback. So
Right.
it is circular in that regard. I'd encourage you to pick a couple concepts. You know, maybe it is add on an Neshabie, add an addition here, shut down 2 other schools. What does that look like? How much does that save off the operational side of the equation? What does it look like from the construction side? And at least it gives you a starting point. What is the general consensus of this board to have a couple strategies or concepts you can start to really evaluate the data points of? Otherwise, you're just, I don't know how you make any traction.
Okay, so at this point we are spinning. We're starting to spin, it is 8 o'clock. So what I think, and you guys tell me if you don't want to do this, but I think what I'm hearing is that an expert or a facilitator would be helpful to us. I think that when we come back together next month and are talking about facilities, that is where we need to determine what those concepts are that we want a facilitator to help us with, or have a facilitator here to help us determine what the concepts are. So tell me what your thoughts are.
And to be clear, you
Lori?
mean a month.
Yeah.
What do you mean by concepts? You don't mean like design plans, do you?
No, I mean concepts as like Tanner was talking about. You know, if we were to add on to Neshabe, or if we were to add on to the high school, if we were to say we're going to close 2 schools, what does that look like? Those kinds of concepts.
Right.
Because once we have options or options that we want to follow, then that kind of leads us to our next point. What do we want to do? You know, what's the next step? And I think one.
So are you looking for just high level stuff? Like, I'll throw one out there as an example, right? Any proposal should be operations cost neutral. Meaning if we're gonna have, you know, extra custodians and extra principals and extra, you know, administrators or whatever, then we should be making that up somewhere else.
Oh, okay. Well, sure. So, but keep that for next month because I don't want to talk anymore about this stuff right now. And I think, I don't mean that, but it is 8:00 and we've talked about it and we are starting to, so those are all the concepts that we need to bring forward next month. That okay? Does that make sense? So I'll talk to Brenda and Renee and figure out if there's a facilitator out there that might be able to help us carry this through. Maybe it's Tanner. How we will shape this so that we can come up with different concepts and then have, from there, determine what avenues we want to pursue. Does that make sense? Okay. All right.
Thank you, Lori.
Yeah. So, we've already talked about the middle school model where we talked about facilities. Do you have any summer project updates you really... No. Good. Excellent. Other business, future consideration?
I think this is big enough.
Okay. Our next meeting is slated for Tuesday, November 5th, which is voting day. So the question is how many people will not be able to be here because they are either helping at the polls or won't have voted by 6:00 that night.
I won't be here.
Okay. Anyone else?
It takes 5 minutes.
To vote? Well, yeah, but because if everybody else will be here, then I'm willing to keep the meeting where it is because otherwise it's too hard to find another day. Fair enough. And if you have to attend via Zoom, that's also understandable. Okay, so we are going to keep our meeting for Tuesday, November 5th, and with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Second. Okay. Good night, everyone.